Here we are at 3 Mile Island in Middletown, Pennsylvania. As many of you know, 3 Mile Island had a near catastrophe back in 1979. So let's say that we want to create an evacuation zone of 50 miles around 3 Mile Island. What we can use to do that is a tool called a buffer. It essentially puts a uniform distance around a point line or a polygon so that you can, and it's indicative of a critical area of some type. So to use the buffer tool, we come to analysis and we come to use proximity toolbox and select create buffers. And as I hover over the create buffers tool, it says creates polygons that cover a given distance from input features. So I'm going to click on that. And while in this example, I'm using 1 point of 3 Mile Island. Let's say that you have the schools for a particular county and you want to put a buffer around them to indicate some type of zone. You can use, it can be more than one feature. It doesn't have to be just one feature like you see here. It's often used also like when looking at streams, like to buffer streams, to look at riparian zones and that type of thing. So the input features that we're going to use obviously are the 3 Mile Island point. And then we have to decide on the buffer distance, and we're going to buffer it 50 miles. So I'm going to type in 50 and make my units miles. The overlap policy essentially means, and it's not going to matter in this particular example, but what do you, like if buffers overlap, how do you want them to look? Do you want them to overlap, or do you want them to dissolve to create a nice clean polygon, or do you want them to overlap so you can see the extent of all the features? So then down here under output name, I'm just going to call this TMI, and it's not too much information. TMI 50 miles. And I like to always, when I do buffers, I like to include the buffer distance in my layer name so that I remember what it is, because sometimes you run iterations of it at different amounts. This way you can know exactly what it is that you're running. Hit run. And this will begin to run the create buffers tool. Now, while this is running, something, because we are talking about spatial analysis this week, that then would be even further interesting is that once we have the buffer for the evacuation zone of 50 miles, then we can say, well, what school districts does this impact, where school districts have to be evacuated? We can overlay that layer and then figure out which ones need to be evacuated. So here we have our nice 50-mile buffer, so we can see spatially what areas would be impacted by this evacuation zone. Again, with running buffers, you can use points, lines, and polygons, points and lines being the two most frequent used with this, but you can use any of those geometries. So that's buffers. How fun, right?